sorry about this. Because we're doing it online, I've got to have my assistant post a link for everybody in there to sign into. For some reason she says she can't see it, but I'll send it again. Okay. Hopefully this is working. Okay. Oh my gosh, we have two things working. I'm going to mouse over here. Okay. So let's do. Let's see if this will work. This table's nice. Okay, here's a chat. Let's see what the chat says. Chat says we can hear you. Great, thanks everyone. Okay, let's see, screen share. There we go. It's happening.
When you're asking them to talk, they can't, because, well, they can, but the sound's down, so you wouldn't hear them.
Because we turned the sound down because the music was
That's right.
blasting. Man, I haven't had this much excitement from a C class in a while. Okay, we're going. All right. How long have you guys been in the business?
A couple weeks.
Couple weeks?
Just over a year.
A year? Couple weeks. Okay, exciting. Let's see. I think what other things I can't really tell if people need to talk or not on this. Well, okay. If you need to talk, please unmute yourself. Also, there should be in the chat coming, for those of you that are online that are coming in, is there's going to be a link to a Google Doc. You need to sign in on it at the beginning and at the end of class if you want to get credit for being in the Zoom class. So please jump on that. If you don't see it, then throw it in the chat or unmute yourself and let me know that it's not there. Okay, so my name's Sue Cragen. I'm with Vanguard Title. I've been in the title business for 10 years and I was a lender for 7 years before that. And I put together this class because I just found that a lot of people didn't know a lot about title and it was really affecting their business. So the main reason to learn all this is just because you're a professional and people are going to ask you questions, and if you don't know how to answer them or you don't know how to navigate situations, then you don't look like a professional and people are less likely to refer you. So honestly, everything that I create is about creating an amazing experience for your client and getting referrals because you could navigate different situations. One of my favorite quotes is from the new Batman movie, the newer, not the newest, but where the Joker says, everybody will go according to the plan, even if the plans are horrifying. So he says people don't panic if they know the plan, even if the plans are horrifying. So if you can navigate somebody through something scary, then they're gonna be okay with it and they're gonna probably appreciate you even more. But if you get to the end and it's just a train wreck and you're just trying to piece it together, that's where people are like, I'm not doing that again. So it's really important. There's just a lot of stuff in here we're gonna go over. So stop me if you have questions. If you're online and you have questions, please just unmute yourself and interrupt me because the way that I have the slideshow set up, it's not showing me the chat box. So if you just throw in a question in the chat box, I won't be able to see it until I switch screens. So just feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me anytime if you have questions. Okay, here we go. The purpose of the class. I already told you what the plan is. So we're going to move on from there. This is a quote from Jim Rohn that I really like. If you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan, and guess what they have planned for you? Not much. And I love that. I think it goes along with real estate. If you just kind of go along and you think everyone else is going to put their pieces in and make everything work, then it might work out for you and it might not. I mean, if you happen to have a really great title team and a really great lending team and a really great home warranty and a really great home inspection and you get to use them on every single one of your deals, you'll probably be okay. But as soon as somebody comes in and is like, my uncle's a lender, or I got a cousin in title, and now, or they make you use the other title company because it's cash or whatever, now you're suddenly at the whim of someone else who's maybe not on your team. All right, so this is kind of like the least exciting part of the thing. It's just the difference between title and escrow and understanding what the escrow company does. So quite a few years ago, I had an agent walk into my office with his client and said, can you please tell them what you do? Because people don't know what the title company does. There's these big charges on their net sheet or on their good faith estimate from their lender, and they don't know what they're for. So we're going to go over that really quickly. So title and escrow in other places, they're separate. Like California, you use a title company and an escrow company. They're separate. In Utah, we are the same company, but we still have separate jobs. So the title part of it is where we're going to search the title of the property. We're going to see who the owner is. We're going to see if they have judgments. We're going to see what liens are on there. We're going to see what other sort of disastrous things they've done that are encumbering their property. And we're going to figure all that out so that we can clear it off and give clear title. Hello. So we can give clear title to the new borrower. The escrow company is the one that is who you work with. So the title people are like, all right, like you don't see them. They work in our office, but they don't really communicate with agents necessarily. But the escrow people, those are the people that you're communicating with on a regular basis. So that's kind of the escrow officer. That's the person that you're trying to find to be on your team when you're creating your real estate team, which we'll talk about again in a minute. But we're the fiduciary. So the example I gave was if you don't use a title company and Nick, so let's say Nick is going to buy a house from me, okay? And so I've got the keys and Nick has the money, and and now how am I giving the keys to Nick? And Nick has to give me the money, and then trust me that I'm going to give him the keys, and then he's going to do this, and then I'm hoping that Nick's funds are not fraudulent, right? And
I'm hoping the keys work.
yeah, and you're hoping the keys work, and you're hoping I didn't take everything out of it on my way out before I gave you the keys. Like all that stuff I said you could have, I changed my mind, I took it with me. So anyway, that's what we do, is we're the ones that get insured. So we protect the funds, we're the ones that verify them, we're the ones that make sure all the lender stuff is done and all the sales stuff is done before we transfer the property. So that's the other thing, is that I'm handing him the keys, I'm handing him the warranty deed that I signed. I'm like, okay, go get that recorded, and then you're the new owner, and making sure that that's all done right. It's a lot.
Is that title or escrow?
That's the escrow side. So we do all that. So could you imagine if your borrower had to go take their warranty deed down to the county and record it and like and give them the money and like figure out all the funds and stuff? It'd be ridiculous. So that's what we do. So, but when you see the escrow charge, that's what the escrow charge is covering. All that stuff, all the managing of money, the getting conditions, clearing off the title policy. We're going to talk about that in a second. That's the big charge. Okay. And that's what they're actually buying. So that's our real product, right? Like you guys sell houses, but you really sell yourself, right? That's what you're doing, right? Anyway.
Relationship and expertise.
Exactly. And so we are also selling service and ourselves, but our product, which no one knows what it is, like, you guys have a product, is title insurance. So that's the big charge that's on there. Does that make sense? Okay, conducting the closing, recording, and so there's lots of different types of policies, but like, like a super boring class on like extended descriptions of title policies, we could do that later. But this is basic. So this is just what you need to know to explain to your client, okay? So there's the owner's policy. So this is the policy that it says in the REPC that the seller is going to provide to the buyer. And this is the one that when like, we kind of worked on this yesterday in a different meeting that I had, where I was like, if your seller asks you what that's for, like, why am I getting charged $1,400? What is that? And then you're like, oh, it's just a thing that you have to pay for because the contract. And they're like, I don't know. I don't really feel very good about paying $1,400 for like kind of a random explanation. So that is what they're providing coverage. So what that does is it does protect the seller, because if there is something that got missed, or there is something that's wrong that the title policy covers, the title policy is going to protect the seller from the buyer coming back and suing them. So I sell my house to Nick, and I maybe don't tell Nick that the neighbor's fence is actually on, or my fence is actually on the neighbor's property. And then the neighbor's like, hey, Nick, like you're going to have to move that now. And then now Nick's like coming after me, or he's just going to have to pay for it, where that's something that the title policy would cover as an encroachment is what that's called. And it covers from the day of the closing backwards. So most insurance covers forward, title insurance covers backwards. So I sell him my house, I give him an owner's policy, and now he's protected from anything that I did going all the way back to the beginning of the property. So anything, any wild things he does, he's on his own, but it covers it back. And then you can kind of add stuff. There's endorsements you can add if there's other stuff. Had somebody call me and like ask about a helicopter pad. I was like, I don't know if there's an endorsement for that, but maybe. Oh, look. That's exciting. I think I would have zoomed enough times now that like I'm not surprised by what it does. Only 1,000 zooms later. So that's the owner's policy, okay? So, and it goes to the buyer in the contract every time. The only time that that wouldn't happen is if you would have to write an addendum specifically saying that the buyer was going to pay for it, or if you do a HUD deal where HUD's like, you have to pay for it. That's HUD will tell you that though. But otherwise the owner is paying for this, goes to the buyer, protects the buyer. The lender's policy protects the lender, okay? So who needs that would be the borrower who's getting a loan, or if somebody's refinancing, then they would get a lender's policy. So it's just like mortgage insurance, where I pay my mortgage insurance to protect the lender. It does nothing for me. It's insurance that I buy for someone else. But they require it. So what that does is it protects their position. So let's say that I put in my fence on the neighbor's property and then I didn't pay for it. And so the fence guy leaned it, and then Nick comes along and buys my house, gets a loan on it, and the fence guy is now in first position and he's gonna foreclose. And that is not gonna make the lender very happy if that happens. So that's what that protects. So that protects their position. So if that did happen, then the lender would be able to make a claim on that policy and get rid of the fence guy and keep their first position. So that protects the lender. You have to have it if you have a lender. So on a cash transaction, you wouldn't have this because there's no lender. So cash transactions are pretty easy. Something important about cash transactions though, is that the only way a title company can close a transaction is if they are issuing a title policy. So that means that any cash deal has to close, cash buyer has to close with the seller's title company. So a lot of times we'll get people send us orders over and then they'll be like, yep, it's cash. And then we're like, unless you can get the seller to use us, we can't do it. So just remember that so you don't waste your title company's time. That's all I'm saying. You'll have to move it anyway. Or you can get them to use your title company. Okay. Questions on that? That's like usually one of the biggest things is people, if you can know the difference between these two things, you are miles ahead of lots of other people. Like they just can't explain that stuff. And I think it's really important for you to sound like a professional, that you can explain the fees on your net sheet and what they're for and why your person should care about it. Because they'll say, can I opt out of that? Can I do this? And you'll be like, well, in the contract, you have to provide it. And honestly, like for how much you pay for it, I mean, you're selling a $350,000 house, $1,400, whatever it works out to be. Like if there is a problem with it, it's gonna be way more than that to fix it. Just attorneys aside, like you're way more to fix it. And I mean, yeah, it's just like any other policy. Like it's a waste of money until you need it, right? That's what we all think about our car insurance, but we pay it. Like, we're not like planning on getting into an accident. But that's how insurance works. All right. Cash transactions. Okay, this is the fun part. Who here is familiar enough with the PR? Is familiar? You? Okay, awesome. You're on deck.
Okay.
I love this. Let me pull it up. Okay, we gotta escape out of this. And I'll pull it up for you right here. Okay.
Oh, clean that up.
Okay, we're gonna start with this. I do have copies for you. They might magically appear up here anytime. Like I said, I didn't realize they were going to be.
She's on her way up with them.
Delightful surprise.
She's on her way up right now.
Okay, so tell me about what's happening right here, Nick.
That's a description of the property.
This is the transaction. So sales price, loan, right there. Okay, this right here.
Yeah, let's. Normally, if I stand on the other side of the street, okay, so this gives you the
Yeah, it's not
fee
very
simple
clear.
interest in the land. All right, so current owners, that's the owner of record. And then, then you get the property address. I mean, this is very simple.
Okay, what's that?
It's all pretty simple, really.
Yes. So, thank you. Okay, he's gotten us pretty far. I'm gonna give you a break for a second.
Okay, good.
Until we get to the next page, then we're really gonna test you, Nick. So get ready. Current owner. I actually do an entire 1-hour class about number 3. Because number 3, it's one of those things. I'm like, if you're not gonna look at your PR because you can't, for whatever reason, people can't look at it. You don't, a lot of times it's because they don't know how to read it. So that's a reason why they won't look at it. But this number 3 is super important because if you don't have the correct owner on your purchase contract, what do you have?
You don't have a contract.
Don't have a contract. I will also accept a problem, and
That's a problem.
It's a problem. It's a problem if you don't have the right people on your contract. So we're going to talk about that for a second. And one thing we're going to cover before we even jump into this, we're going to talk about 4 things that are not going to be on here. Okay, so we're going to show you all the stuff that is on here, but there's things that aren't on here that people think are going to be on here, and then they're like, well, why didn't my title company tell you about that? The same reason why your dry cleaning place will not mend your clothing, because that's not what they do. And those things are not things that we do. So you need to be aware of that so that if those are issues, you're looking in the right spot for them and not expecting them to show up here. They won't show up here. Okay. Do you guys have any idea? Nick, any idea what's not going to be on here?
Oh, things like guardianships and decision makers, court appointed or otherwise. I've got a deal right now where somebody is trying to help their mom sell the house, but even though she's on title, okay, she's not the decision maker.
So, because she has
Because the mother has a different decision maker.
She has a guardian. Okay.
A different guardian.
So
and these are things you're never going to find out until,
yeah.
And then you pull this and it's not on there, and then that person shows up, and then they get into a fight.
Right. So along that same lines, this is something that we talk about in that class that I do about the seller. So if this person is deceased, we do not know that. There was no knowing. So one of the things I say about this class all the time is that people always think that magic happens in real estate. So they think that if somebody passed away, then it magically went into the name of someone else. Or they think if I got divorced and I get the house, then I think my ex-husband magically came off the title and off the loan. Okay, there's no magic, okay? If it's not recorded with the county, didn't happen. And it's a rare thing for somebody to have somebody pass away and for them to like go to the county and record the death certificate and do all that stuff. That's typically not happening. So
It's not hard.
no, it's not. People just don't do it. 1, they don't know they need to.
Yeah.
2, they just don't. So it's really important that you look at this because I will tell you we've had a closing where we're like, hey, is Mary gonna come? And they're like, ooh, we hope not. She's been dead for 30 years. And we're like, okay, well, what's the problem? Okay, it's a big problem. There's a reason. There's something that's called vesting. So typically it'll say their names and then it'll say either joint tenants or tenants in common. Okay, this is really important, which is why I do an hour-long class about it, which is why I'm gonna keep talking about it. So joint tenants or husband and wife means that if one person passes away, the house will go to the other person. It doesn't have to go to court. You do have to bring the death certificate. And then you have to sign something saying, an affidavit saying that they're passed away and you're the other person on title. But death certificate, original, okay? So that means we have to get that, which is not something you typically want to be asking for at closing. It can be really sensitive. Like you don't know how long it's been since they passed away or what the circumstances were, but it can be really jarring for people to be asked for that. So it's a lot better if you can kind of do it in a nice way rather than at closing being like, having the escrow officer be like, okay, then where's that death certificate? And they'll be like, what? Like, who needs that? Like, I did a loan once for a lady whose husband was killed like in the army overseas. It had been pretty recent. And you could tell it was hard for her to give me that, even though she knew everything can. It was just emotional. So what we don't want to do is to create bad emotional situations at closing. So knowing ahead of time, and we had one, it was last summer, and we called this lady and we were like, hey, Barbara, we need your social security and Susan's to clear something off of here. And she was like, well, here's mine, but Susan's dead. Do you still need your social? And we were like, no. But it was not in joint tenants. So tenants in commons means that everybody gets their own piece. So if it doesn't specify, it's just split up between however many people. So if there's 2 of us, it's 50-50. If it's 3 of us, we all get a third. But if I pass away, my portion goes to my heirs. It does not go to the other 2 people on title. So it's really important. Thank you. All right, and then that's the sign-in sheet as well. So if you could please write your name and your license number on the sign-in sheet, then we'll make sure you get CE credit. And then here's a little packet for you to follow along so you don't have to try to stare at the blurry screen from back there. So it has to, if it's tenants in common and someone has passed away, it has to go to court. And when I say has to, I mean has to. Because people in Utah, typically pretty cheap, like they don't want to send things through court and they want to be like, how else can we do this? If there's a will, it doesn't matter. The will be considered when it goes through probate, but it has to go through court and somebody has to be appointed to sign for that person as the heir. So that was a big deal when we called Barbara and Susan and found out that one of them had passed away, because now it was supposed to be closing in a couple days and it has to go to court now. So you're looking at like 30 days for a probate situation. You can get them done as fast as a week, but that's like really on the like magical end of it. So it's really important that you look at this, because if you don't, coming up, finding somebody's passed away. So it won't tell us. So there's something else that's not going to be on here is if it's a rental. Like we don't deal with rental things at all. It's not going to say if it's a rental, and you need to be asking that, because if it is a rental and you have a buyer, then you're going to want to make sure that the contract is specifying the rents and the deposits and that they're getting those things transferred to them on the settlement statement. And so we've had people be like, oh, we didn't know it was a rental and where's all the stuff? And we're like, you don't know. Like, we don't know anything really about the structure that's on the property, like where it sits or anything else. Like if you look at our plat map, it's boundary lines. So if the house is in the middle of that boundary line, like we don't know that unless somebody's recorded something about it on the title. So it's important that you know that. Something else that we always run into is water rights. Typically water rights are not going to show up on here. The only time they do is if there's a well on the property and it's been recorded, which is rare. So if you're in a rural area, then you'll want to go to the Division of Water Rights and figure that out, ask the questions to the sellers and find that out. It's not going to be on here. So another important couple other things with the vesting. I guess thought we were going to move on from that one. We're not. There's a couple more things. So divorce is another one where once again people are like, oh, they're still on there, or they're like, no, they've been taken off, and you're like, they're not. They're still on here. In fact, this PR is one where I'll show you on the next page where, in her defense, the ex-wife did try to. If you've already signed in, then once is great. The ex-wife had tried to remove herself from title, but she did it herself. She did it wrong and it bounced, so she was still on there. So we still had to have her come in and sign. So it's really important that, and then you got to find out, right? If they're divorced and now are they going to like come into closing together? Or are they going to be like this one lady who was like, she lived up in Far West and we needed her to sign something. And she was like, well, you can come to my house between 2 and 2:05 and I'll sign it. And if not, then I'm not going to do it. You guys think I'm making this up? We had another lady that was sick. It was an ex-wife. We were trying to get off title. She wasn't feeling well, and she made us come to her house and bring soup in order to sign off. So it's important that you know like what you're dealing with here. It's all going to be there. Okay. We're going to talk about trust really quick. If it's in a trust, we're going to have to get a copy of it because we have to know who the trustees are. Because I'm telling you, and so there's a phrase that we use in real estate. It's called trust but verify. And it's because I don't think people are typically trying to deceive us. I think they just have no idea how things work, or they don't remember. Like they got the trust 10 years ago. They haven't looked at it since, so they've totally forgotten that it said in there. So one that we had recently was there was a daughter who was the trustee, and she was like, no, it's just me. And then there was a little thing that said in there that it was just her unless the mom had passed away. And if the mom had passed away, then it was her and her 4 sisters. So guess what?
Hunt them down.
The mom had passed away. They were all on there. They all had to be added. They all had to be brought into the loop. One of the sisters was a mean attorney in Idaho who wanted to like cut the agent's commission and like was mad that she was just being brought into the deal at that point. It was like this whole mess. So it's really important that you find this out. Like there's other things in there too, like divorce decrees. People don't read them, you know, and then we'll go in there and be like, hey, the divorce decree says we have to like split the money this way, and they'll be like, oh, well, we did something else, or you know, they like, or it will say they'll just forget what it says in there. So trust but verify. Another thing I ran into a lot when I was a lender is second mortgages. People would be like, oh, I owe $200,000 on it. And then we pull their credit, pull the title, and be like, hey, we have this $50,000 equity line on there. And they're like, oh, is that on the house? I'm like, yeah, nobody gave you like a $50,000 personal loan. So yeah, it's on the house. But they just don't, like, they neglected to mention that. So important that we trust but verify. So just, not that you don't want to trust your clients, but just remember that they don't remember, or they don't understand, they don't understand things, how things attach, so they just don't know. So it's really up to you to verify everything that they say. Like if they tell you that their bankruptcy is closed, or all these things that they tell you and then turn out not to be correct because of whatever misinformation they had. So it's really important that we trust but verify. Okay. And the last thing is LLC, just kind of runs along the thing of the trust though. Something important to know about a trust though is that if that trustee is unavailable and there's not a co-trustee, you can't use a power of attorney. So I had somebody that called, and it was in a trust. The parents were the trustee, and they were on some kind of like service mission in the back jungle of Africa and couldn't get to a notary or whatever. And you know, and they were like, oh, but I have a power of attorney, and it's like you can't use it on a trust. So there's just literally nothing you can do until they can get somewhere that they can sign it or amend the trust to change the trustee. So people are always like finagling stuff. It's like, it just doesn't work that way, especially with property, because property is one of those things that's protected by the Constitution. So we can't just be like, oh, well, we can't find the seller, so can't we just take it? No, you can't. You can't just take it. So or if you have a will, that doesn't work either. It has to go through the court. Like there's just a lot of things with property that we have to be really careful with. Okay, property address. I always say just verify it. Especially if it's on a corner. Sometimes USPS has a different one, or sometimes the people give you the wrong address and then you record and then you sell the wrong house. We had a lady that insisted on that she had given us the right numbers because she had the piece her house was on, and then she had an empty lot behind it. She was trying to sell the lot to the people on the other side, and she ended up selling her house instead. So luckily they were nice and they fixed it, but I mean, don't accidentally sell the wrong piece of property. No one likes that. Okay, questions on vesting? Good? Okay, great. You guys can all come to the 1 hour class later. We talk about conservatorship, guardianship, incapacitation, underage signers, all that stuff. It's very exciting. Yeah. Okay. Along with this, I'm going to show you guys a little industry trick. It's really important, actually, that you do this because we see a lot of people kind of run into problems with it. So what I'm going to do is pull this up right here. Okay. So I didn't used to tell people this because they always thought I was like had some kind of like secret title information that you guys can't get, but it's like just on the internet. But more and more counties are getting to put most of their stuff online. So if you can figure out how to navigate that, it's just really helpful because you can actually pull up public documents, you can see who the owner is, you can do all this stuff, you can do this cool thing called this interactive property map. So this is for Salt Lake County. And some of the other ones have something similar. So I'm just gonna show you a property here and kind of just tell you why it would be important for you to do this when you're buying or selling, just so that you know exactly, if you can kind of see, and I'm going to show you a couple of other examples of why this is important to do, because this is fun. Horror stories are fun, right? You're just glad that it hasn't happened to you yet. Okay, let me see if I can figure out where this is. There's 215 I-80, that's what I want right there. Okay, so what I'm gonna do though is pull this up first. Oh boy. So you can look it up on Google Maps, but Google Maps is not going to show you the boundary lines. Okay, we're going to go
Who's on the
satellite.
right?
What's that?
Who's on the right? The
It
running club,
was.
is that what you were looking for?
What's that?
You're looking for the running club?
Well, I'm looking for a house near the running club. That's just the fastest way to get to it. Okay, so I'm going to give you the satellite view of this. Okay, so right here, we're looking at this area right here. If you were just to wager a guess, how would you think these were divided?
Thirds, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a fence line here, right?
Yeah.
Fence line here,
Roundabout way.
fence line here, there's a house back here. It's questionable as to where the, oh, that's got a little sidewalk though, so we're gonna assume that's with that, right? There's a fence here that goes across, right? It looks pretty cut and dry, doesn't it? So if we go over here to the parcel viewer and we click on this same, see that right there, that one that we all were like, no, that's its own thing. Guess what? That parcel that we thought was its own is actually the backyard of this one and the backyard of this one. This house is part of this one. And when the people bought this, they did not know that. They started getting notices about this house that was going into disrepair, and they were like, what are you talking about? And then they come here and they click on it.
Is there an existing fence right there?
Yeah, it goes all the way across the back.
Oh, okay.
So that's what's confusing about it, right? But that's why it's important to look at this. So you click on this, but this is just kind of a cool thing right here. So if the Zoom thing wasn't there, there's a whole bunch of information that it will show you on the property that you can click through. But you can pull this up and you can click on all the houses right by your house and see that. Then you find out that like your neighbors don't actually own their house, and like, oh, they're renting. Who knew? Then you can be like, hey, somebody has a house.
What was that website called?
It's the Salt Lake County Assessor's website. So the other thing too, this is the parcel viewer, but if you just go to the Salt Lake County Assessor, you can search by address, you can search by last name, and you can just pull up all the tax data, you can pull up all the information. So something important to remember though, is that a lot of times the recordings are not real time on there, even the data that you have in your MLS. So if you have a question about who the owner is, or how it's vested, I would just email your title company and ask them and just say, hey, real quick, what does the vesting show on this? Because we actually do have our own system that we have to log into that gives us way more data than this, that you can't get, that is real time. So if you ever have a question on a deed or something like that, it's best to just ask the title company to look that up. But for just kind of a quick reference, just looking at that, you can pull this up and look at that. So I'm going to show you a couple more examples about why it's important that you use this tool so that you don't end up with a problem later. Okay, so here is, I don't know, this one says first, so we're going to pull it up first. Okay, so here's a plat map, right, of this Sugar House property. So this is the one that they were buying, and there's like a little jog right here. This is the street, okay, right here. And then this is the neighbor's property. It's right here. So Sugar House is notorious for crazy stuff. So they have all of these alleys, and some of the alleys are like an easement that people can drive through. Some of them are split 50-50 between the two people. Like this person would get half of this and the other person would get the other side, or just like all kinds of wild stuff. So if you're doing Sugar House, it's going to be extra important to figure out where all this stuff goes. You see all these like wild lines everywhere? That's Sugar House. Just everything kind of, and you have a lot of flag lots. Do you guys know what a flag lot is? You know what a flag lot is. Flag lot is, let's say you have this property right here, but then you have one behind it, and it's not have access to the street. So they'll have a little road that goes, looks like a little flag, that's why they call it that, goes behind it. So there's a road that's adjacent to the property in front that is either property of the person behind it or it's an easement. And then we'll talk about easements in a minute, but so you just kind of want to pay attention to that. That'll be important in a minute about the easement. But so here it is. Looks fine, right? I mean, this property is road access. It looks fine. But now we're going to pull up the Google Street View. Actually, this is that's from that parcel viewer. So two things right off that you could tell from the plat map are that these two parcels are separate for some reason. But this is the driveway right here. Remember that jog? Neighbor to the east owns the first half of the driveway. So here's the problem. I mean, if you can't tell what the problem is, here's the problem, right? These two people have an arrangement. They let them use the driveway, no problem. So it's fine. Me and these guys are best friends. I sell my house to Nick again, poor Nick. And they have no deal with Nick. So Nick's using the driveway and they're like, you know what, Nick, actually we own that and we're gonna plant a garden right there. Surprise! So the fun thing about that is it's not necessarily gonna be covered in the title policy because the title policy guarantees access to the property. They have access to the property. There's no blocking them to get to their house. You can still get to your little shed that's right there. But is that what you were expecting when you bought the house from me? No. So now Nick's probably going to come back and sue me for non-disclosure that I neglected to mention that I didn't actually own the front half of the driveway. And maybe I didn't know. Maybe the neighbors just let me do it. I never knew I didn't own it. But at any rate, Nick's in a mess now. And is it the real estate agent's fault? Not necessarily, but are they mad at the real estate agent? Yes, they're always mad. Yes, the answer is yes. They're mad at everybody. I mean, somebody should have told them. And so, but from the plat map, you can see that we have no idea. So if you're like, why didn't the title company, on both of these cases, we had them be like, why didn't the title company tell us? And both times it would be like, because we have no idea where the house is or where the driveway is. I mean, you can access the parcel, that's what we care about, but we don't know where the structures are. That's why you're going to the property and doing inspections and looking at this stuff, right? So we're not gonna know. I'm not gonna know if the neighbor's shed is right here. That's where you're gonna walk out there and be like, that seems far over, or whatever. But if you pull up that parcel map, it's gonna give you a pretty good idea of where those boundary lines, and you can see, let's see if this is still up, you can kind of tell if something's where it's not supposed to be. So something that's interesting about this one is if you click on this, okay, if you click on that one, and you zoom in, then you can see, look at that.
Does title normally send someone out for a site survey?
Almost never.
So you just are all going off these records. You don't know if there's an agreement with the neighbor.
Yeah, so in this particular case, this whole family owned this area, and we knew there was an encroachment because they had filed an agreement about it earlier. But if there was an encroachment and this guy and I come over here and say, hey, I'm building this thing, it's going over your property, and he's like, I don't care. And then that's it, right? And then I sell my property to Nick. And now they care, then they can make him tear down that section of the property and move it off the boundary line. Or the neighbor can sell that part of the property to Nick for however much they want and get a survey and redo the boundary line. So, and that's pretty common. I mean, you'll find out years later that fences are in the wrong spot. But I mean, like, it's pretty quick to just jump in there and look at that. But yeah, as title people, we have things that we insure, and we don't insure like where this stuff is, what's on there. Like, we don't really know what the structure is. Like, obviously the lender is going to care if half the house is on another parcel, but
This is where paying for a survey, especially in older neighborhoods, comes in handy.
yeah. I mean, sometimes you have to do it. It's just like, if you're not sure, especially if they're not like clear cut lot, like in newer subdivisions where it's like pretty clear cut. But yeah, and some of these things, like these sugar house ones for sure, it's like the only way to know that would be to have looked at the plat map. So you would have looked at it and thought, oh, it looks normal, but you would have been like, there's a weird jog there. Like, where does that fall? So you would have seen that and then asked yourself a follow-up question. That's weird. Where does that come in?
Maps aren't going to address whether alleys have been vacated, whether they become easements, I mean, the Rocky Mountain Power could own that easement for all you know.
Right. Yeah. So the plat map will say there's a utility easement. Plat map will say that. I had a twin home once that had a big utility easement along the side of the neighbor's house because it was right next to the creek. And so she owns that, but she can't build on it because of the utility easement. So she had like 10 feet that she couldn't build on because there's a road that goes through there. And if she built on it, they can make her tear it down. So, okay, so yeah, so this, I tell people about this now because we've had several things where this stuff like this sugar house thing comes up. And so I'm just like, it's just easy to jump on there and just kind of check. And like I said, a lot of this stuff isn't going to be your fault, but even when we get into wire fraud, if somebody's mad and they want to sue people, they're going to sue whoever they want. And then it's your job to be like, hey, I shouldn't be in this lawsuit. I wasn't at fault. But to say like I can't be sued, I mean I could sue Nick because he has cool red shoes and I don't. I mean it's gonna be thrown out, but I could at least
You'll
initiate
never
it.
get your hand on the Ruby Slumbers. Just give it up.
But you see my point. The idea is that you don't even want to get pulled into something. And it's unlikely you're gonna get a referral. That's all I'm saying. I mean, a lot of people are very understanding. They know it wasn't your fault, but there's a lot of people that are just mad when stuff like that happens. Like, and it's, I mean, I'd be frustrated for sure. Okay, so let's get back to this, unless somebody has questions. You people online are awfully quiet. Maybe you're just like having all the chats, but I can't even see more. Here we go. Oh, here's the link to sign in, and hello. Okay, good. Put that there. Okay, next page. Nick, you've got it in front of you now. Okay, exceptions.
Mhm.
So exceptions mean stuff we're not going to cover. We're going to talk about easements for a second. It's important that you just at least understand what they are. We've kind of touched on them. So let's define it though. What is an easement? Does anybody feel good about?
That's where somebody, another party has an interest or right to that particular part of the property where you have limited rights to your use.
Perfect explanation, Nick. Great job. Did you speak title?
Huh?
So,
better on the block. I look good, but a lot of miles on the clock.
I love that. So a good example of this is Main Street downtown. So Main Street used to go all the way through, and then the city of Salt Lake sold a portion of that to the LDS Church. Well, Main Street is a public street, and there's an easement that says that as a public street, people can be on it whenever they want. They sold it, and that easement was not removed. And so you will see a lot of panhandlers that they can't get rid of because it's a public street still. So that's important that you know that. So I'm going to show you where a lack of an easement is a pretty big deal because, like we said, you have to have access, right? And so, like in the example of that flag lot, if the driveway, let's say I sold the house behind me to Nick and it's on a flag lot, and I own the driveway, okay? So in order for Nick's property to get a title policy on it, he has to have guaranteed access, which means there would have to be an easement saying that Nick can access the driveway all the time whenever he wants. And I have to agree, it's on my property, but that's an easement for the driveway. I'm not gonna change my mind and turn it into a garden. Like, it's always available for him to use. It has to be recorded, we would see it on here, and then we would know, and then easements stay forever unless you record something to remove it, which people often never ever do. So people usually don't move easements. So just real quick, because it's fun to look at these things. Oh wait, hold on. Here we did. I'll show you that one yet. I'll show you this one. Okay. All right. So the property. See, people online can't see. Okay. So everybody can see the mouse though, right? Okay, so here's a gas station. The property that they wanted to buy is right here, okay? It's this little tiny, like, trapezoid right here. So there's a road that goes right here, okay? It's called the South Jordan Canal Road. These people have a bunch of garages right there. So they get in their driveway through right here. It's a gas station with a cement roll right here. The only way to get to this place is through this road. Here's the problem with the road. So here's the plat map. Here's our property right here. Surprise! The road doesn't go all the way through. How are we doing?
You're good.
Oh, okay.
It's not working on Zoom.
Oh, it's
I
not?
tried it. It's just got a gray box. Let's see.
Uh-oh. Are you guys glad you're live? Okay, so I'm just gonna, can they hear me though?
Yeah.
Okay. It's gone.
Sorry, I'll get it back.
No, it's fine. No, we want them to be
Which
able
one
to
is
see. It is
Left. On
the middle left. Photo. No, keep going up and over to the left. Left, right there. There you go. That's it. Okay.
All right, hopefully that's.
Did you send me a chat and I didn't see it?
No, somebody else.
Oh.
It was showing a gray box, so then I looked. So, that working, guys? On Zoom? Either unmute or
Yes.
say something.
You don't have a great log button.
I see it now.
Okay, it's working.
Okay.
Cool.
Perfect. Thanks, Russ.
You're welcome.
Does the sound not work? Could you not have been like, hey Sue, it's broken?
Oh, I probably could have done that.
Oh, I mean, I love, you're welcome to come up here
Yeah.
anytime, but I'm just, I don't know. I haven't heard anybody say anything on here. Hey Keely, can you tell me if the sound works? Are you still on there? I don't know if she is. You might have gone on. We'll find out. If anybody
am.
can, oh, that sound works. Great.
Sound-
Sound's working.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Maybe it's not up high. Did you hear like a?
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
think you can hear me.
Okay, that's working now. Gotta have the volume.
Yay!
Okay, thank you. There you go. Okay, so just yell out if you've got a problem. We can hear you now. Maybe you were before and volume wasn't up. Okay, so if you look at your plat map, originally this would be an obvious problem, right? So we have to guarantee access. There's no access. That road goes through those people's yard. And so if they don't, so at any point in time, they could be like, never mind, I'm gonna fence that off, and now you can't get to your property. So that would be a problem. So what you would have to do is go to every one of these property owners and get them to sign an easement saying that they are not going to build a fence over that. And then people say, well, what about that rule where you've been using it for 20 years? And so it has to be 20 years of continual use, and you have to kind of make an argument that you had permission to do it in the first place. And you're gonna have a tough time probably with that many different people saying that you had continual use. And it's like a big legal battle. Like you have to take them to court and say, I've been using this, so you can't take it away. I mean, it's just like
So
kind of a
what's the
disaster.
solution then?
Have to go each one of those and buy it.
Yeah, you would just have to go to each property owner and get them to
Right.
sign an easement.
But what if they said no?
Then,
I'm just trying to understand.
yeah, like what they would do. Well, you can still sell it, just won't insure it.
So your company then would say, look, we're
Yeah, we would say we won't insure it. We're not going to issue you a title policy, but I mean, if Nick's like, no, I really want it, because Nick likes buying crazy properties that have problems, obviously.
fly-in or something.
Yeah, well, he's just banking on the fact that he can use the road. He's like, they've always had the road open. They're never going to close the road. He's like, my parents, maybe he's buying it from his parents. Like they've been using it forever. He's like, I just feel like they're not going to close the road and I don't want to do the easement. Then they could just transfer the property's name into Nick's name and he owns it now and he can use it. And then, but if these people decided that Nick doesn't have a policy, he can't go and do anything. He's going to have to figure out another way to fight that battle.
Helicopter pad.
Helicopter pad it is. So yeah.
Solved.
Yeah. So then he would be like, oh, I'm going to take these people to court and say that they can't close off this road because it's public and blah, blah, blah. So yeah. I mean, you're just like looking at a legal battle, but you can always transfer property. You just can't have a title policy on it.
Okay.
So it's what we call unsaleable. Because in our
Comes with a
opinion,
helicopter pad.
yeah.
So
Because
it's
in our
not
opinion,
worth it for you.
yeah. Well, no, because to us, this as an insurance company, that's a liability waiting to happen. You buy a property that you can't access, and then later you're like, hey, why did you tell me that? I can't get to it. We're like, we didn't. So we won't insure it, but yeah, you can always transfer property. Let's talk about transferring property for just a second. So just something interesting to know. And if you want things to tell your clients, because you're always like, oh, I want to call my SLI, I don't tell them. So vesting's always a good one. Like, do they know how their property's vested? They probably don't even know what that means. So I always feel like that's a good one. I did a Facebook Live on the vesting and why it's important that you should know that, because a lot of people don't, and they'll just like randomly throw people on. And so like a lot of older people will do that. So they'll be like, oh, like Nick's parents will be like, let's put Nick on the title. And what they don't know is Nick hasn't paid his real estate taxes in 10 years. He's got $100,000 in tax liens. And as soon as Nick goes on that title, all of his tax liens go on too. And then if he's like, oh, don't put me on, because guess what? Your parents can put you on without even asking you. They're like, oh, hey, guess what we did? Yeah, and you were like, oh, my tax liens. They're already on there. And if they're like, oh, shoot, and then they take Nick off, which, by the way, I can put Nick on my house. I don't have to ask him. I can just put him on there. And I can add him to the title. And if tomorrow I'm like, oh, that maybe wasn't a good idea. Well, guess what? Nick has to sign to get off. So everybody that's on has to sign to change anything on it. The only place that doesn't apply is if I have something as a tenant in common. I can assign my portion of the property without the permission of the other people. So if I own something, tenants in common with you, I own 50-50, then I can just deed that over to Ryan. I don't have to ask you about it. But otherwise, if we're joint tenants, both people have to sign. So once I throw Nick on there and I'm trying to take him off, I can't take him off without him signing. So it's important that when people are just like, I'm going to add so-and-so to title, that they understand it. I had this guy call me. It's like this crazy deal that he wants his daughter to rent to own the grandparents' house, but he's going to put her on title. And then he's like, hey, and then at the end of the 3 years, she's either going to buy it or she's going to decide she doesn't want it. And I'm like, she's on title. Like, she owns it at that point, because it's like the family house and all the siblings are expecting a piece of it at some point. And I'm just like, when she's on there and she doesn't want to give them anything, she doesn't have to. Like, it's hers now. And so there was a whole thing just explaining that like once you're on there, you own it. And so people will do that too, where like they'll have a bunch of kids and they'll be like, I'll put the oldest one on title, and then he'll distribute that. So if the oldest one it turns out to be like, maybe he doesn't like his siblings and nobody knew, and so he can keep it all. And there's nothing anybody can do because he owns it. So smarter thing would be to put it in a trust, which is what I was telling them, but they didn't want to pay any money. So they didn't want to put it in a trust. And if they put it in a trust, then they can specify what happens to the property. And there's a trustee that signs off on it, and it will say once this is sold, they can put all the terms in the trust. But
They can put everyone on title?
what's that?
Could they put everyone on title?
Yeah, you could, but once again, if you're getting to that many people, it's almost better to put it in a trust, because if you put it in a trust and then you have them as trustees, then all their liabilities don't get attached to the property. So if I just put 7 individuals and they have to pay their RC Willie, they got a foreclosure, they got tax liens, whatever, all that stuff gets attached to the property. Now you're trying to sell it, got problems. If I put it in a trust, then that's not gonna happen with that. So I have a friend who's a title guy up in Park City. He did a flip with a realtor, and they both went on title for it, went to sell it. And there's a disclosure somewhere that says, like, if you have any liens or judgments that you know about that we don't know about, tell us now. I don't know what happened with that because it closed up there, but it did turn out that he had like $75,000 in IRS tax liens from not paying his taxes and on the flip. So that was a problem for when you're trying to flip a house. So it's a big deal that you understand who you're putting title on. And I even tell my friends, like, if they're like, hey, I want to add my husband on there, and I'm like, I'm sure he's great. Like, I'm not trying to say anything, just telling you that if for some reason, child support, old liens, whatever, those are all going to attach. So it's just important that you know that as far as things getting put on title, people don't understand. And once it's on there, it's not like, oh, I take your name off and it's gone. Like, it's kind of crazy that that's how property works. It's on there. You're going to have to pay it now.
So as an agent, how do you approach a client and ask these kinds of questions so that you know if there's a lien, or is it something that would go to your company for and have you pull it up? How does that work?
So that's what this document does, which is great, this title report, because anything that's on the property is going to show up on it. So that's why we want to learn how to read it.
Okay.
So we talked about easements, taxes. So if you did something and they were like, okay, I just want to get enough money to just be done with it. I'm not going to get anything out of it. And then they owe 2016, 17, 18 taxes haven't been paid. They owe another $8,000. Is that going to affect your transaction?
How do we get this though?
So when you get a new listing or a buyer under contract, you would send that to the title company, and then we would pull this for you and send it to you. And then, so if you have questions, so we don't pull them. If it's not under contract or a listing, we're not going to pull it because it costs us money and effort and everything. But if you have questions, you can say, hey, can you tell me who the owner is? Hey, can you see if they're like what liens there are? We can do kind of like a soft search if you think, like, we don't want to do that on every single one of your deals.
Right.
But we had somebody that was like, hey, this guy thinks he has a $10,000 attorney's lien. Can you look it up? And so we look it up and we're like, yes, he does. He also has a $50,000 attorney lien. Yeah, whoops. Because that's important to know, obviously.
So when you say a buyer under contract, you mean that once they've already signed the contract to buy a specific home?
Yep.
Got it.
Then you send it to us, and then we'll produce this report and send it to you.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great question. And I'm glad that you said that because people are always like, when do I do it? So when you get it under contract, if you've got a buyer, right as soon as you have it under contract. And then if you have a listing, as soon as you get the listing signed, because a lot of people will wait when they have a listing until they get it under contract. But then guess what happens? You get a cash buyer that wants to close in 3 days and you don't have a PR and they've got all this crap on there and it's somebody's passed away. And so we always tell people don't wait. Like if you have a listing, let's just find out if there's stuff on it because then we have time to work on it without having surprises. So those are when you should do it, is right at those times if you want to have the best amount of time getting stuff fixed. Okay, so Nick's back on deck here.
This place is a mess.
It truly.
I'm gonna skip to the chase. If I'm representing the buyer, I'm calling the seller's agent saying, I need some proof of funds because they're coming to the table with some cash or this deal going nowhere. Let's not waste my time. Let's not waste your time. And I should slap you for even taking this listing because they probably don't have cash because they don't have cash.
What does this $122,000 federal tax lien bother you, Nick?
Oh God, it's not just the federal tax lien. They don't pay their taxes to anybody. They've got a judgment against them. They've got a line of credit secured. This is layers and layers and layers deep. Run.
Yes. So ask a couple questions. So yeah, this is probably like, I mean, obviously I use this one for teaching because it's pretty ugly. But a couple of things to point out. Deed of trust. So most properties are going to have a deed of trust. That's a mortgage lien. They might have 2. Sometimes they have 3. Usually there's going to be 1. If there's not 1, then we want to make sure that we didn't miss it, or it's like maybe it's paid off. Some people do have it paid off. So he's got a revolving line of credit for $100,000. It's revolving, so that could be 0, could be 100,000. We don't know how much exactly they owe on
They
that.
have to release that.
Right. So if you get down here, you see right here, a quitclaim deed. You guys are following along online. Hopefully you can see it. I think you guys all still see the screen share.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ish.
Okay. Mostly. Okay.
Ish.
So number
I
14.
take it back. It's the plot map.
Oh, it is the plat map?
Yeah, I apologize.
Okay. Let's fix that. Thank you. All right, there we go. Hopefully now. I feel like it should just change with the screen, right? Makes sense. Anyway. Okay.
Victory.
What?
Victory.
Oh, victory. Okay. I thought you said number 3. I was like, oh, there's number 3. The effects of a quitclaim deed. The deed is uninsured, didn't pass through the county. So the ex-wife, remember this is the one that had the ex-wife. So she had gotten remarried. So she had done the deed herself, put her new name on the deed, but she took title in her old name, and so bounced. The stuff has to match. Property description has to match. The parcel number has to match. And if those things don't match, then the county bounces the deed. They may or may not tell you, depending on if you put an address in the corner, which they probably didn't, so they didn't know till now. So then here's some fun things on this one. Let's see. A judgment against the debtor for $100,000. Okay. So she filed a judgment against him for $100,000. There's also a home equity line for $100,000. So you wonder, did he pay her off? Okay, guess what he did? Guess what he didn't do? He didn't have her release her lien. So he gave her the money, didn't release the lien. Luckily this one, the ex-wife was actually really nice and came in and signed everything, but it could have been just a train wreck of her just being a jerk, which we often have, is like, they'll just drag out coming in to sign. And then if they could refuse, and then obviously he would have to prove that he paid her, and then they have to go to court and blah, blah, blah. And usually what people, the real jerks will kind of like drag it out just before they go to court because they know they'll lose and then they'll sign, but just causes a lot of stress, waste everybody's time. So that's why I just tell people, like, there's just some things you shouldn't do yourself. If it's over, if you're talking about $100,000, let's just pay somebody a couple $100 to do it right. Okay, so here, this is a pro tip here. on federal tax liens. So when I was a lender, this is what not to do, okay? When I was a lender, I got a PR and they had like a Division of Family Services, like back child support on there. And so I called them and was like, "Ooh, hey, what is this?" And they were like, "That's not ours. I didn't know that would be." And they actually freaked out. So don't do that. If there's something that's on the title report that you weren't expecting and you have questions on, call the title company first and verify that it's actually there. So this actually is not all his. We had a common name. And so if we don't have a social, we have to put it all on there until we get a social and a birthday. Middle initials are helpful. And then they remove all this stuff. So a lot of title companies will send, like when we send out ours, we'll put a little blurb in there that says, hey, we're working on 17, 18, and 19 to find out if they're actually the borrowers. So before we call and wreck the place with the borrower, we want to find out, or the seller, we want to find out they're actually theirs. But sometimes they'll be like, no, that's not. And then we'll go back and be like, it really is. This is really yours. Like we've matched the social and everything. And they're like, oh, those tax liens. Okay, yes, those are ours. So always ask the title company first. They may tell you in their little description that they're trying to clear it off or whatever, but I would just make a quick phone call and just be like, hey, have you verified? And if not, then you can just call them and ask for their last word, their social, and their birthday to say that you need to verify some things. But don't want to, like, when people think there's liens attached to their property, they get all crazy, oddly enough. So there you go. So you just want to find out, but it's important that you know what this stuff is, because if it is real, it has to be cleared off. So tax liens, there's no like, hey, can we move it to the new property? Like there's no subordinating it. There's no moving it. You have to pay it. They don't go away. You can't wait it out. A lot of liens, like if you don't pay your RC Willie and they get a judgments against you for 8 years is as long as they can keep it. So you could wait it out, have it fall off, but they do have the ability to renew it. So you could wait 8 years and then they just renew it and you're still stuck with it. So, I mean, the only time I would probably go that route is if I knew they'd gone out of business or something. But anyway, so this stuff has to be cleared off before we can close it. Questions on that?
And there's more.
And there's more. This is like the worst one. So there is one thing that doesn't show up on here is a bankruptcy. So we'll have this happen where people will be like, no, it's good. And it'll say discharged. But a Chapter 7 that's discharged is not, it has to say it's closed. Because if it's not closed, then there's a good chance that they don't have permission to sell it. You have to get permission from the bankruptcy court to sell it. And it's really important that you know that, because we're going to go to closing and be like, can't close it. You have to get permission. And then you're like 30 days out, right? So nobody likes that. Once again, stuff you want to know up front to say, hey, you know what, we verified that your bankruptcy is actually not all the way closed. It's in this different state. And we have to get permission from the court to sell. You want to do that in the beginning, not at the end. People are stressed out and the buyer's lock's expiring and all the worst things are happening. Okay, homeowners fees, reinvestment fees. Who's had to deal with a reinvestment fee? How'd that go, Nick?
Well, there's fees and then there's the fees that stack up upon the fees. So the thing is that the, I don't know, $2,500 that they could have paid 8 years ago, because I think this goes back to 2011 years ago, turns into, I don't know, $40,000.
Yes. Are you talking about HOA lien though?
HOA liens and reinvestment fees. So the reinvestment was an assessment.
Oh, and it wasn't paid, so it was just
So it just kept on rolling up.
stacking up. Yes. So it's important that you look at this. So this doesn't tell you how much the reinvestment is, but it does tell you that there is one. So I did a closing for somebody that had a $700 reinvestment fee. They didn't even know about it. And so I was the one telling them at closing, like, oh, yeah, you do. You have to pay this. And so there's like a little box on your contract that says who's paying what. So if you're like, hey, the buyer will pay the transfer fee, no big deal. You think it's like $200, right? Then it turns out that it's this. And so even if it says in the CC&Rs that the seller pays it, if you have a purchase contract that you just offered your buyer to pay it, your buyer's going to be on the hook for it. So you really want to make sure you know what that is. Or if you have the seller, I mean, if they have to if they're paying another 1.5% out and they didn't know, like you want to figure that out right in the beginning. I mean, HOAs are the biggest cluster of fees, of unknown, mysterious fees that are happening. And some of them are a percentage and some of them are a flat fee. And basically, I think them filing this document just gave them permission to do it. but you still have to call them and find out what it is, because it just says, oh yeah, we have the ability to apply a reinvestment fee. It tends to be very vague. But you would definitely want to find out. And then getting the CC&Rs and asking if they're going to buy something that's in a CC&R, it would be important to just ask them questions about what their intent is with the property. Like we just talked about one yesterday where one of the CC&Rs of this little PUD didn't allow dogs, and they didn't find that out until after they moved in with their little dog. And then the one that we lived in, we wanted to buy it because we wanted to rent it out. It was a townhouse. Our neighbors wanted to buy it because they were told that you couldn't rent it out, and they didn't want to live in a place that hadn't rented out. And so there was a dispute, but it was right in the CC&Rs that you could rent it out. But I mean, it's all just, and some of them are hard, you know, some of them are like 100 pages long, but I mean, you kind of want to know what's in there, like wild and crazy stuff that no one knows about, but it's important to check that out. UCC financing statement, if you see this, it's something that needs to be paid off. So a UCC is something that got financed and used the house as collateral. Most commonly, you will find that to be solar panels. And that will always be like a mystery story about, like they would, this isn't happening as much anymore because solar is becoming a lot more common, but they used to be like, no, we're not gonna attach it to your house, and then it's attached to the house. And then we have to pay it off. But like other stuff, like if people have a shop on their property, like cabinet shop or whatever, then they can finance their shop equipment and use the house as collateral, but that has to be paid off. So this is, if you see UCC financing statement, there is something there that most likely needs to be paid off, which is money, bottom line, changes the deal, all that stuff. Okay, questions on that? Okay, great. No questions? It's pretty quiet online. Too quiet. You guys are lucky these people are here in person, otherwise I would be coming after you, so I wasn't talking to myself this whole time. Okay. Oh good, you guys can listen to that too, that's exciting. Okay, so we already went over the plat map. I mean, this is a subdivision, it's pretty straightforward, right? You can look at this and be like, okay, that's good. No, nothing there. But I've shown you some where it's obviously not the case. And you might need to call and be like, which one's mine? This right here has the easement. I just wanted you to see what the easement verbiage looks like. So it'll be in the property description on that first page that Nick showed us, where it says together with. And that is going to say easement. So this one has right of way to common areas. So it just says there's an easement with it. But that kind of language, accepting and reserving, is easement language. So if you see that on there, there's something going on. And there's another plat map. Okay, questions on reading the PR. I always tell people you should at least be able to go through it. You don't necessarily need to understand what all these things are, starting with that mortgage deed, but you should at least be able to identify whether or not you need to ask questions about something. So you just need to know, like honestly, if you go through there and you're like, I don't know what this is, then I would pick up the phone and find out, because that's really what you want to know. Is this a problem? So there's a divorce decree on there. Is it a problem? Well, we don't know. It depends on if the divorce decree included the house. So we'll pull a copy of the divorce decree and pull it up, and if the house isn't in it, then it's not a problem. But if it does say stuff about the house, then it depends on what the original sellers thought was the case with it. Okay, so let's go back to this slideshow. Now that we've done that. Oh, look, there's my quote. We're gonna skip that though. I talked about this just briefly. I wonder if I need to
Yes.
do this. New share. Here. Go. Okay. So just briefly, I talked about this in the beginning, but creating partners, not just like there's a title company that closes my stuff, but like a partnership where they're trying to support you, you're supporting them, you're all working as a team to get your deals closed. Having a good lender, somebody that you can count on that's gonna, if you have a buyer and you negotiated $5,000 in closing costs, that you have a lender that's gonna make sure they use all that. And if they don't use it, they're gonna tell you, and so you can figure out how to use that. You've got a title company who's gonna make sure that they let you know what's happening with your title, and they can navigate you through these decisions, and they're on board to get your deals closed. When I was a lender, that was critical for me because I was always closing at the last minute. And if I didn't have somebody that wouldn't travel, that wouldn't close after hours, like that would have killed my business. And so it was important that I had somebody that worked with me. And same with the inspection and the home warranty, just making sure that you find people that you have a relationship with. Most of us are good people, will help out strangers, right? But most of us are a lot more willing to help out people that we have good relationships with. And for me, that was one thing as a lender I found wasn't always the case. I worked with this one title company that the realtor picked, and sometimes I literally had to call the realtor and say, can you call your title company and ask them to call me? Because they wouldn't return my phone calls, they wouldn't answer my emails, like I couldn't get anything done. It was really frustrating to me, and then I didn't want to use them again. But I did not feel like they were a team with me at all. I felt like they were buddies with the realtors and they could care less. But I'm the one who's trying to schedule the closing and do all this stuff, and the title company's not working with me. That was frustrating. So making sure that you have people that are on your side, that are working with you to support you in your business. Let's see. Maybe we'll come back to this split closing. It's important, if you don't know what a split closing is just Utah is one of the few states where they allow the buyer and the seller to close with a separate title company. It's just important that you're aware of the mechanics of it is probably the most important thing. So we're going to skip to that because we have problems with newer realtors who will schedule a closing on a Friday thinking that it's going to fund and record, and then their clients are going to be able to move in over the weekend. Nick's shaking his head because he knows that's not how it works. So a lot of the times you really need to schedule it a couple days before so that there's time for all this stuff to happen. So we're going to go through the timeline real quick so that you can see what exactly needs to happen. So you've got the buyer and another title company has the seller, and you're wanting to get your buyer in there. And so this is kind of what happens. They have to sign, first of all. So they're going to have to bring in, and maybe they're bringing in money, maybe they're getting 100% financing. Let's assume that they're bringing in money, and let's assume that it's over $10,000 and has to be wired. So they are going to come into the title company and they are going to sign, and then we also have to get their money from the lender. So these things have to be wired. So there's a wire cutoff time of 3:30. If it's sent after 3:30 p.m., it's most likely not going to get to where it's supposed to go the same day. So if we don't close until after 3 and we don't have the lender's money, we're probably not going to get it till the morning. So we're already not, like, closing the same day is off the table at that point. Also, if they have funds and they need to send them, then that also has to be sent before 3:30 because that is the cutoff time there. And understanding, this is why knowing how your lender works, do they send the money before? Do they have to have certain things back before they send it? Do they just not fund the same day? Like maybe there's like, we never same day fund. It's important to know that when you're getting this set up. So at the same time, the seller's signing and they're going to their title company, but we're going to have right here the buyer's funds. So the buyer has a down payment, and we're just going to stop right there for a second, and we are going to talk about wire fraud. This is a big thing right now. And it's really important that you educate your clients about it in the very, 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 very beginning of the transaction. What part of the transaction? Okay. A lot of people are like, oh, I'll tell them at closing. Okay. It's too late. Their money's gone. So what's happening? Lots of things are happening. But they're hacking into your email. They're hacking into your assistant's emails, somebody's email. They're getting their information. So, and we've had them create fake title company domains where they would take, so my email is sue@vtitleutah, and they'd create a vtitleutah where the I in title is an L. Like you're not even gonna notice that. I might not even notice that, right? And then they're sending your client an email saying, here, send the wire here. So what you wanna be telling your client is to never, ever, 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 ever take wire instructions over the phone, through an email, through any way until they pick up the phone and give them our phone number that you gave them. Okay, we're not calling the number on the instructions because that's a fake number. And then they'll be like, yeah, we totally sent that. This is Vanguard. Is calling the number that you gave them and verifying that we sent that. So we've had emails go out, and don't think that your clients are gonna know because they don't do real estate all the time. These are these, like sometimes people think that if they don't hurry and follow whatever an email says, they're gonna lose the property. And that's not how it works, right? But we had somebody that, I mean, if you looked at the email, you would have been like, no way would you have sent it to this, because it didn't say Vanguard title. It said some other account number. It was out of state. It was not the right amount. It was all the things that were wrong, but they did it. They sent it off. They got the email and they sent off the money. And then we didn't know about it until we have to go to close, and we said, we need to wire your money. And like, we already did. Gone. Okay. Like it's so, like we've gotten wire fraud back twice, which is like catching 2 unicorns. It's literally like almost impossible to do. So it's really important. You have to catch it like right then. So if they send it a week ago, chances are you're not getting it back. And that's just, to me, it like makes me sick thinking of people just losing that much money, because it's like, that's their house. That's who knows their life saving. Now the seller's not like all the things, right? So it's really important that you tell them that up front. Like, if you get wire instructions, like the best thing that we want to do is we want to hand them to them at closing, or they can come to our office and get them. Or we can do a 3-way call where we send it to them in a secured thing, and then we're on the phone verifying your client, it's us, here's the wire instructions. Like, we're just crazy about it right now because the scammers are crazy about it. I mean, they're even getting to the point where they were doing email, but they started calling. So they would call you as the borrower and say, hey, this is Vanguard. We've changed our wire instructions. We're just gonna give it to you over the phone. Or we're gonna send you an email with them in there. And then you'd be like, okay. If that happened, you'd be like, if Vanguard calls you and changes the wire instructions, and you want to call them back on the number that you gave them and say, did you just call me? And we'll probably be like, no. We had a client call us that were like, hey, we're at the bank. You're emailing us right now to wire to you, but we don't have your address. So we need your address. And we're like, we are not emailing you. Like, do not send it. Like, they were at the bank ready to send it. And then they're also doing the same thing for seller funds. Well, they'll call us up and they'll be like, hey, Vanguard, it's Nick. I just closed on my house and I want to change my seller wire instructions. And then we'll be like, great, thanks, Nick. And then we're going to call Nick back and be like, hey, Nick, did you just call us? And he's going to be like, no, I did not call you. And then we won't change it. So we're going to do that. But I'm trying to terrify your clients, okay? Because my husband worked for a small builder for a while, and they're really good. Like, it used to be like really clunky, right? Like, they'd have bad grammar, all this stuff. You could tell it was a fraudulent email. It's getting a lot harder. So they went into the owner's email and they copied, like, he even had like kind of like his own special like closing thing where he'd always say like warmly. They matched that. They put in a rule into his Google that would automatically send any email from the accountant into a folder. So it would skip the inbox. And so we emailed the accountant, and then they had him wire $30,000, and then the owner was out of the country on vacation. But I guess that wasn't unusual for him to do. Then they did it again, and that was at that point something was weird, and he called and found out. So I think he ended up losing like $45,000 before they caught it. But it's just like through the email, it's just like we're so quick to respond to emails, we don't even check. I was out last Christmas running some errands, and I got an email from our escrow manager that just said, hey, are you busy? And so on my phone, it just says his name. I can't even see his email on my phone. It just says his name. So I respond to him like, no, what do you need? And then he's like, can you go to Walmart and buy, it's like, I want to get a gift for the people in the office. Can you go to Walmart and buy 10 $500 gift cards? Scratch off the back and send me a picture of them, right? So obviously I immediately know that this is fake because 1, he's never going to ask me to do that. 2, we're in the same office. So like, why would I take a picture of them and send them to him so that he could give them out? Like, so I knew right away that it was fake. But so once I knew that, I went and tapped on his name, and then I saw that the email address wasn't his. But I didn't know that. But like on my phone, I don't know that. So that's just something to know, that I could just put in your name, crazy email, but on your phone, all you're going to see is my name unless you specifically tap the name to reveal the email. So anyway, please terrify your clients at closing, just to make sure we don't want anyone to be victims of wire fraud. Okay, so back to this. Stand off my wire fraud soapbox for a minute. Okay, so we have to get all the funds. And then, so they're wiring me their down payment, they're wiring the lender funds, and now as the buyer's title company, I have to send another wire to the seller's title company because they're the ones that have the sellers. So once again, I don't have all that stuff and I don't send that wire before 3:30, they're not gonna get it same day. So there's just a lot of moving parts that a lot of times we don't realize. Oh, danger. Look at that. Okay. Here's all the things we just talked about. But if you don't have 2-step authentication turned on your email, you should do that immediately if you're using Gmail, because what that will do is anytime somebody tries to log into your account, it's going to text you a code to your phone that you have to put in. Kind of annoying, but it does keep other people from hacking into your email. So, and that happened in the beginning. We had assistants and stuff that would send us emails trying to change the seller's wire instructions, and we caught them because they weren't that sophisticated back then. So we were lucky. But if the more people that have that, the better it's going to be. So watch out for that. Okay, then we're going to, once the seller gets the money, that's when they're going to record the warranty deed. So the warranty deed is what transfers the title. Your buyer does not own the property until that warranty deed is recorded. So when you're asking about when you can get keys, that's when that can happen. Obviously, you can do whatever wacky things with keys before that, but as far as liability, if you give out the keys to a buyer before that's happened, the seller still owns it. So that's where you get into problems with if damage happens or something that it's like, well, whose fault is it? Somebody told me a horrible story about they let them move in a couple days early, and they had set boxes on the stove, and then the stove got turned on, caught the house on fire, seller's house, fire stuff, like it was a mess. So just make sure that you're clear on liability, just knowing, do whatever you want to do as far as what your clients want, but just know the buyer doesn't own it until that warranty deed's recorded. And usually you'll get a message saying we're on record. Once that happens, then we're going to disperse the money. So that's when you'll get paid. That's when the seller will get their money, and all that stuff will happen at that point. Ta-da! Right? You get paid. That's the best part. So it's important that you know this, because even if you plan on Thursday, there's a good chance it'll fund and record on Friday for the weekend. If for some reason something here doesn't happen, now you've missed your window weekend. So if it were me, I would say shoot for Wednesday. If they have to move in. Sometimes people don't have to move in. And I've definitely done a few loans where it was like, we're sitting here with our moving truck, we're out front, like we're ready, like just like so stressful, right? Like I just don't recommend putting yourself in these high stress situations where people are sitting out with moving trucks. And sometimes you can't avoid it, but if you can, then I say do it. We used to have a thing where we would always tell people like, we'll show you the date. This is when we expect to fund it, record. There's no reason why it won't. And then the county caught on fire and they closed and we weren't able to fund and record. And so we started telling people like, so I told this story at a closing where I said it will 99% chance fund tomorrow unless something wacky happens. Told them the story about the county catching on fire. And the next day the county closed. It was February of last year. We had that great big snowstorm. And the county closed. Like there's just like a recording that was like snowing, so we're not coming in. Like, okay. We've closed the county this year for an earthquake. We've closed the county. I mean, just like we don't know, right? It's 2020. We don't know. The county closes whenever they want. So just be aware that that could happen, and then we have to wait until they reopen to record. And we record electronically, but they still have to be there to do whatever they do. So we send it, they have to do it. So they also close at 5, I think right there. We say 4:45. So if it hasn't recorded by 4:45, you might get it done, but your chances are getting smaller. So just be aware. And then there's just like wires can take 40 minutes to 3.5 hours to receive. That's why we try to tell you to do it earlier. So we'll tell the buyer even like send your wire in before you come so that we already have it. If possible, just if you're tight on time, there's things that you can do to try to move it up, like close early in the morning, have them send their funds the day before or the day of, or so that we already have it. So there's things you can do. I mean, same day fundings aren't impossible. We do them all the time, but you do have to know what you're up against. If you want a same day fund and you don't close till the afternoon, there's like no possible way to do it. So just know if you're trying to do that, if it's critical, there's just a lot of things that have to be in place to make that work. Questions on that? Any stories? Got any backfires, Nick?
I had a realtor try to unwind a deal. They had multiple offers on it, and sellers closed remotely via power of attorney because they were on Molokai. And seller's agent tried to invalidate the entire deal because they signed the day before because they were in Hawaii.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, the broker made a phone call and said, bring it.
Like that doesn't work.
No, they could have signed it last week. It doesn't matter. They performed as long as it's not daylight.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So I had one when I was a lender where the realtor who I didn't met, my relationship was with the borrower who was getting a loan. So I was doing their loan, and I got a contract. This goes back to picking a partner too. So they sent me the real estate contract, and I think what they had done was just like wrote in the first date, and then they just counted. Wrote the next date. What they did not do was consult a calendar as to what those dates were. So settlement deadline is on a Sunday. So because they just wrote in the date, and when you pull the date, it's a Sunday. So he's got $5,000 of earnest money, super hard loan. It's probably the most stressful deal I ever did in my life. Anyway, it was Park City, and I was just dying to get the deal done. Like I had to send it all the way up to like our highest underwriter because he had all this like weird income. He like rented his condo out during Sundance, and he had a camp in Maryland and like just all this stuff. And then Friday morning, right? Because now we have to close on Friday because the seller won't extend. So we have to close. The seller won't extend. It's $5,000 in earnest money, which is kind of a lot. Not anything I want to like hand out of my own pocket. And I call up to the title company in Park City who the agent had chose, and they don't have anybody that will, oh, the borrower's out of town, of course, right? He's not going to be in until 5:30 on Friday. And the title company doesn't have anybody that will close it after 5. And they're like not offering me any sort of solution. As like, they're not going to find a notary for me. They're just like, sorry, we can't do it. So I'm like, what do I do? Seemed like pretty awful. Like after all of that, it's going to die because no one will sign it. So what I do is I called, so it's actually the company that I work for now, but it was 3 names ago. And I called Louis, who's the owner of Vanguard, but he was an escrow officer at Atlas Title at the time. And I was just like, how fast can you guys get me a PR? And can you close this tonight? And so they got a rush on it. They got me a PR in like 2 hours, sent it back to the underwriter, swapped all that out. And he closed it on Saturday morning for me when the borrower got back, and we got it done. But I don't recommend that situation. But a couple of things about that. So one, when we're talking about deadlines, like just make sure you're paying attention, because that's the other thing that we saw one just barely that was like, the settlement deadline will be 4 days after the inspection of the outside of the house. And I was just like, well, that seems vague. Like, is somebody going to tell us when that happened? Or just counting it off, you know, like when you just say, settlement deadline is 10 days from the date of the acceptance of the short seller, whatever. It's like, well, look, can we make sure that 10 days is not a Sunday? Make sure that you're looking at those days, especially right now, because in this buyer's market, a lot of times the seller is not going to give you an extension, and you could end up losing your borrower's earnest money because, like, at that point, I was in a real bind. I mean, Monday would have been magical, right? Instead, I was dealing with Sunday and an out-of-town client, and so checking those dates, but then also having a good team. Like, I could not have pulled that off without somebody that was willing to do a favor for me and get that done. So that stuff just kind of all comes together when you're talking about title and making a good experience. It's just not a great experience when you're like, ooh, like we set the date and it's Sunday and now I can't, you know, and it's like you're trying to explain to your borrower about why this is a problem. It's just not that smooth experience. So once again, this all goes back to being able to give good information, planning ahead so things go smoothly. Another tip I want to give you about the closing is use your escrow officer as a resource to make you shine. Because a lot of the times you're going to go above and beyond, and they're not going to know that that's above and beyond. They just think like every realtor should do that. Especially when I was a lender, it was like, they give me that, like that deal, you know what I mean? I got to kill myself to get that deal done. And then this guy was actually really grateful, but we've had people be like, oh, I can't believe I had to pay these fees or this interest rate, when really you're like, it was an amazing rate. And this was a really hard deal. Like no one else can even get this deal done. But it's awkward if I'm like, man, Nick, I really went out of my way to make this deal work for you. You're kind of like, okay. But if the escrow officer goes, wow, Nick did all that stuff for you. Like he waived his transaction fee and he went and did that. Like most realtors would not do that. Like that sounds a lot better, right? So don't be afraid to do that. I mean, people just don't know what they don't know. Like I don't think people are trying to not withhold generosity or praise, but sometimes they just don't know that you went above and beyond. So don't be afraid to use them as a resource to kind of make sure that you shine in a way that they didn't know. And people will appreciate you more if they know that you went out of your way. So it is 11:40. So if you are online, I think you need to re-sign that Google Doc, right? That you were here for the whole time to get credit. Are you here to do?
We're just talking about this to set up the.
Okay. So anyway, there is a little bit more to this, but if you guys have questions about how to read a settlement statement, how to read a PR, then I've got your emails and stuff, and so I'll send you an email when the credits are banked. But come by anytime if you need help with any of that. Like, don't walk into your closing, never have seen looking at a CD or a settlement statement. Like, let us show you how to read it so that you can see if you have questions on that. Any questions, call or text us. So thank you all for being here. Hope you have a magical Tuesday. You enjoyed the class, and thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties in the beginning. Okay.
These things happen.
Well, they do. Even though I've been in here 50 times using this stuff, it still happens. Thanks, Russ. Do we have any more chats?
you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Where did I end up with both of those? Great.
See you soon.
Have a good one.
So I showed up just a teeny bit late. What do I have to do to get credit for being on the class?
There's a Google Doc that you need to sign into. There should be a link in the chat for it.
Let's see.
You're welcome, everyone. Oh, right there. So if you go to the top, there's a link for the Google Doc. And I'm just gonna leave this up.
I'm not. It only shows like the last like 5. Oh wait, there it is. So I just go to that Google Doc and just say that I was present for the class.
Yeah, I think it has a couple of things for you to fill out, like your license number and such.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Sounds good. I'll see if I can get that to work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What happened? Look like there's snow on your boot, on your left boot.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my shoe guy is so incredible, and he so if you would like a reference.
Hey, Sue, do you know who Brianna Walsh is?
I just got a pair of boots fixed, which is why I probably even noticed that. Is it 801?
Yeah, 699
699.
2236. Brianna Walsh.
Yeah, she's been logged on the whole time, but she hasn't, and she's still logged on, but she hasn't responded to anything about signing into the Google Doc or anything like that.
Oh, she's right there. Yeah, I don't know. Just add her name and I'll ask Russ about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yep, come on in. We're all
I just sent
done.
that to you.
Oh, thank you
Nice
so
to meet
much.
you.
It was nice to meet you too. And
I'm Erin.
you're Erin.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna end this now, so hopefully everybody had what they needed.